Hello everyone, I'm Yogesh. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, we will be learning about variables and how to manipulate them. We will also dive a little deeper into the concepts of numerical and string operations. Before we proceed, this video assumes that you are aware of the basic data types and arithmetic operations in Python. If you haven't watched my previous video in the series, feel free to watch part 1 of the series to better understand this video. Now let's get started. A variable works like a placeholder for values that keep changing frequently. One of the most powerful features of any programming language is the ability to manipulate variables. Now let's look at an example of what a variable is. So let me create a variable called message. Let's say let's create one called number and put now let's display these variables. The first assigns a string value to the new variable message. The second assigns a number 20 and the third one assigns the approximate value of pi. So let's say I wanted to go ahead and use these values in my further lines of code. I don't need to go ahead and keep writing. Now let's say I want to use the value of pi. I don't need to keep specifying 3.1415. I can just go ahead and input the name of the variable pi and it will substitute the value and I can do my further calculations. Most programmers choose variable names that are usually specific to their purpose based on what the variable is used for. For example, if I were to create a variable that contains the daily temperatures of a particular city, I'd simply name the variable as temp, and that's easier for my understanding. Simple. Usually variable names can be as long as you like. They can contain both numbers and letters, but there are certain rules to remember for variable names. Let's explore them with certain examples. Now Python throws us an error over here. The reason being 21 hello is an illegal variable name according to Python. The reason being it starts with a number. And the first rule to remember is that variable names cannot start with numbers. Now if I wanted to use number maybe somewhere in between, I can do that. Now for example, let's say it is hello 21. This one is accepted. But we cannot begin a variable name with a number. The next one is, let's say, now the reason why Python is throwing an error for this variable name my name is because variable names cannot contain spaces, and if you notice I actually have a space in between my and name. So in certain cases, let's say you want to create a variable name that have spaces, like in this example. So in that case, I would suggest that you can use an underscore symbol. This one is accepted. So let's see another example. Let's just say Yug, that's enough. This variable name is also illegal. The reason being it contains a special character, the @ symbol on your keyboard, and we cannot use any special characters for variable names. Now let's try another example. Now what's wrong with finally as a variable name? It does not contain special symbols, it does not start with any number, nor does it have any spaces between them. Well, it turns out that finally is actually one of Python's keywords. These keywords are some predefined and reserved keywords in Python that have special meaning, and the interpreter uses these keywords to recognize the structure of the program. They cannot be used as variable names. You don't need to focus on memorizing this list because in most of the development environments that we will be working with in future, these keywords will be displayed in different colors because the interpreter recognizes that the user has actually entered a Python keyword. An expression is a combination of values, variables, and operators. Sometimes even a single value or a variable all by itself is also considered an expression. The following are all kinds of legal expressions. So these are all expressions all by itself. So let's say even if I wanted to go ahead and do number plus 25, that's an expression all by itself. So you notice whenever I go ahead and type an expression in the prompt, the first thing that the interpreter does is evaluate it, which means that it finds the value of the full expression. So in the first case, the total expression was just 42. In the second case, the expression was just a variable 10. But in the third one, you notice when I typed number plus 25, the interpreter evaluates the entire expression. That is number, which is basically 10 plus 25, and the total expression value was 35, and it spits out the value. So far we have run Python in the interactive mode, as in we directly interact with the interpreter. Interactive mode is a good way to get started as a beginner, but when we work with more than just a few lines of code, it can get very congested and clumsy. So a better solution is to save the code in a file called script and then run the interpreter in script mode to execute it. The popular convention to save Python scripts is by using the .py format. Let me show you with an example. So let's run Python. Now this is the interactive mode, okay? And I'm saving this in a Python script file. Let's call this test.py, and this is how we save Python files normally, by using the .py extension. Let me save this in the desktop. It's saved. And now to run it in a script mode, normally I would like to use the Sublime Text. This is the popular script editor. If you guys like to use Sublime Text, I'll attach the link to the download in the description. Okay, now let me put this side by side to explain the differences. Okay, so there are a lot of differences between the interactive mode and the script mode, and sometimes this can be quite confusing. Let's explore this with some examples. So let's try to go ahead and calculate and convert miles to kilometers. So the one on the left hand side is the interactive mode, and the one on the right hand side is the script mode. So let's say that's 26.2 miles. So if I'd like to convert this into kilometers, I just say miles into 1.61. So basically the first line assigns the value to miles. It has no visible effect. The second line is an expression. So the interpreter evaluates it and displays the result in kilometers, which in this case is 42. Now let's try the same on the script mode. I'm not running it. Let me first go ahead and do 1.61. Now notice the output is actually not displayed on the screen. This is because in the script mode, the expression all by itself does not have any effect. Python actually evaluates the expression, but it does not display the value unless you tell it to. This kind of behavior is confusing, especially as a beginner, but don't worry about it. So in script mode, suppose you want to go ahead and display the value of an expression, you need to outright mention it. So in this case, I might have to go ahead and type print minus into 1.61. And when I run this, notice the script goes ahead and displays the result. So this is one of the primary differences of running a code in the interactive mode and the script mode. A script usually contains a set or a sequence of statements. So if there's more than one statement like what we're seeing in this case, the output will appear in order as the statements execute. So to demonstrate that better, let's say I type print one. Let's say I create a variable called x and let's say there's 2 inside that. Print x. In this case, notice when I run the code, right, it first prints 1. The second expression, which is assigning the value of 2 to the variable x, that has no output. But the third one, where it says print x, that has an output in the screen. So it's displaying the output in the order as it's being executed. So that's how scripts work basically. When an expression contains more than one operator, the order of evaluating the expression depends on the order of operations. Now, what do I mean by this? Let's say we have an expression something like this. 5 minus 1 into 7 minus, or let's just say 7 plus 2 to the power 2 divided by 3 minus 1. Now before we get to solving it, let's put a pin on it and try to understand how Python evaluates it. For most mathematical operators, Python follows the popular PEMDAS convention to evaluate an expression, as in parentheses have the highest precedence. So if an expression contains parentheses, they are evaluated first. So let's see with an example what I mean by this. So let me comment this. Let's do this later. So let's say I have an expression something like 5 into 3 minus 1. Now the answer to this, Python will first go ahead and evaluate what's inside the parentheses. That's 3 minus 1, 2. And then the result of that is multiplied with 5. So the answer to that is 10. Okay. I'm still in the script mode. I'll have to print this. So the answer to this is 10. Let me show you another example. So let's say I have something like 2 into 2 to the power of 5 minus 3. So in this case, Python will first go ahead and evaluate the same thing again, what's inside the parentheses. So that's 2 into 2, 4, and 5 minus 3, that's 2. So that's 4 squared. The answer to that is 16. There you go. So the next highest precedence is followed by exponentiation. So let's say we have an expression like 1 plus 3 to the power 3. Okay, so in this case, the answer to this is 28 and not 64. So you might get 64 if you do 1 plus 3, that's 4, and you do 4 cube. That's going to be 64, but that's not how Python evaluates it. Python will first give preference to the exponentiation. So it's going to do 3 cube, that's 27, and 27 plus 1, and the total for that is 28. See? Let me show you another example. So let's say 3 into 2 to the power 3. So in this case, the answer is 2 to the power 3, that's 8. 8 threes are 24. And the answer is in 216. You would get 216 if you multiply 3 into 2, that's 6. And you do 6 cubed, you would get 216. But that's wrong. So exponentiation would be done first, and the result of the exponentiation will be later multiplied by 3. And therefore, the answer to that is 24. Multiplication and division have higher precedence than addition and subtraction. So let's say an expression contains both operators of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. The interpreter will first evaluate multiplication and division, and then it will evaluate addition and subtraction. So let me clear this out. Say we have an expression like 6 into 3 minus 1. So the answer to this, so Python will first evaluate multiplication. So it's going to do 6 into 3, that's 18 minus 1. So the answer to this is going to be 17. Okay, and not 12. Similarly, let's say we had an expression like 4 plus 6 divided by 2. The answer to this would be 6 divided by 2, that's 3. 3 plus 4, and that's 7. So don't try very hard to memorize this. As you keep working with a lot of expressions, you will eventually get the hang of it. Now that we've understood the order of operations, right, let's go ahead and try to solve our original equation. So before we do it, let's break it down with our understanding. So first, let's try to solve what's inside the brackets. So that's 5 minus 1, that's 4 into, that's 7 plus 2 to the power 2. So 2 to the power 2 is 4. 7 plus 4 is 11. 4 into 11 divided by 3 minus 1, that's 2. So the answer to this is going to be 22. Okay. Now let's try to print our original equation itself. Let's see if the answer matches. So you see 22 and 22. So essentially, remember parentheses, exponentiation, then you have multiplication, division, and then addition and subtraction have the last precedence. Remember, anything that goes inside a quotation mark is considered as strings in Python. So let's say, for example, I entered a number inside quotation marks. Python will still go ahead and recognize that as a string. So let's use the type function. So let's say I entered 1. So essentially that's a number, but since that's going inside quotations, Python is going to recognize that as a string. Okay, and the thing is, I cannot go ahead and perform mathematical operations on them. So let's say I try something like print 4 divided by 2. Python is gonna go ahead and throw me an error. It's because it's recognizing these values as strings. But if I remove these quotation marks, it's going to be eventually recognized as integers, and it's going to give me the result as 2. Okay, so some of the other strings, so let's say I did something like print hello divided minus by, it doesn't make sense. You cannot perform mathematical operations on strings. Okay, but there are certain exceptions to this. The addition and multiplication operators can actually be used on strings. What do I mean by this? The addition operator performs string concatenation. String concatenation means you can join strings by linking them end to end. So let me demonstrate this with an example. Let's create two variables containing strings in each one of them. So let me call the first one called first name, Yogesh, and last name, and I do. So I've created these two. Okay, now I want to go ahead and concatenate them. So it's very simple. So I just type print first name plus last name. I run it. You see it's been concatenated. Now if I wanted spaces, I can just go ahead and first name. So I've got some space there. But this is what I mean by string concatenation. The addition symbol is used to concatenate two strings. So I can even, let's say for example, I wanted to do it on numbers. So let's say 4 plus 3. So you get the result as 43. So it's not adding it. 4 plus 3 is 7. But in this case, it's actually just putting the strings together. It's just concatenating them. And the next one is called string repetition. So the multiplication operator also works on string, and this performs string repetition. So let's say for example, I say print hello into 3. So it's going to go ahead and print hello thrice. It says hello, hello, hello. So this is what I mean by string repetition. So in this case, remember, if one of the values is a string, the other one has to be an integer. I cannot multiply one string with another string like we initially tried. That's going to throw as an error. So I can put this as any value. If I put hello 10, it prints hello 10 times. As simple as that. As we start coding more and more, the programs become more difficult to read. And this is because formal languages are dense and it is often difficult to look at a piece of code and exactly figure out what the code is doing and why. So that is why it's good to use comments. Remember when we used to study for exams, a lot of us have the habit of using sticky notes to summarize the information on a specific page in the textbook. So it's easier for our understanding. So let's say just 5 or 10 minutes before our examination, if you want to summarize what's in each page, we would just look at the sticky notes and that would exactly tell us what was the information contained in that page. Similarly, it is good to add notes to your programs to explain in natural language about what these programs are doing. These notes are called comments. We've actually been using comments earlier as well. It starts with the hashtag symbol on your keyboard. So let's say a simple comment would be something like, let's say I created a variable called area. Okay, and let's say this is the area of a circle, pi into r square. Okay, now just by looking at this code, if I want to try and interpret it, it might be a little difficult. So instead, I'm just going to go ahead and add a note saying compute the area of a circle. So this is what I mean by the comment. Remember, everything from the start of the hashtag symbol until the end of the line is ignored during the execution of code. So this part doesn't really affect the execution of a code. This could be maybe right after they execute the line of code, or I can also input this before as well. I can also put this here. It doesn't really make a difference. So comments essentially make your task of reading the line of code extremely easy. I hope you have a clarity on the foundations of Python now. Stay tuned for my next video. We will be learning about the functions, and that is exactly where you will try and understand the essence of how these concepts come together. Feel free to drop a comment if you have any thoughts on this video. If you like my content, please like and share and subscribe to my channel. I will post a new video every Tuesday.